Hey, Joe here. In this video, I want to talk to you. Look, you can see my microphone. It's bouncing right there. In this video, I want to talk to you about the compressors inside the StudioLive Series 3, and we're going to take a listen to what they sound like. I've done this already with the EQs. Now we're going to do it with the compressors using the same drums that we use for the EQs for a slight bit of consistency. What you were looking at on the screen, this is the Universal Control app, which controls the mixer. I'm only using this for demonstration purposes. Everything I'm going to show you can be done using my hands on the mixer. I just thought it'd be a little bit easier visually for you if I did it in this software. But this software is controlling the mixer. It's like a remote control for the mixer, okay? So let's take a listen. I've got some tracks playing in the background here of some drums. Okay, we use these drums, these tracks for the EQ section in the other video. Now we're going to take a listen to the compressor. So let's start off with the standard compressor here, which is pretty typical. Not going to spend a lot of time here because it's just kind of standard kind of stuff here. So we said a 2-to-1 ratio-ish, 30 millisecond attack, 100 millisecond release, sort of. And we're going to pull the threshold down and see what this sucker sounds like. It's not bad. It's not the most amazing sound. It just kind of sounds very clean and very normal. I think this compressor, I've mentioned before, is a utilitarian type compressor. Control volume, control peaks, give it a squeeze. It'll do that job just fine. It's not going to add anything fancy or fun to the sound. You're not going to go, ooh, I love the way that compressor sounds. This will be one that you don't really hear. It just does its thing and can sound pretty clean. Okay, let's move to the tube compressor. Now, if you're familiar with this one, this is like an I'm sorry, I always get those backwards. This is like an LA2A, LA3A optical style compressor. It's only got two controls. Peak reduction, which is kind of like the input, and then the gain, so how much volume is coming out of it. And that's it. And so the way it behaves is just how much compression you're gonna have, and if you like it or not. That's all you got. You can't control attack time. You can't control release time. You can just control how much compression is happening, and you can flip over between compressor and limiter, which I don't hear a lot of a difference there. I'm sure there is, but I usually just leave it on compressor. So let's see what that sounds like on these drums. Okay, they're quiet now. Let's turn up the compression. Okay. Okay, so it's doing its thing, right? It still feels like not a super fast attack time, but it's not super slow like we had on the standard compressor with a 30 millisecond. So it's kind of hitting that kick pretty quickly, and it's releasing kind of around the same range to my ears. I could be wrong, but it's doing a fair amount of compression, but it still sounds fairly smooth. You can hear the release, you can hear the pumping a little bit, but it's still a fairly usable sound for drums. Now let's just, for fun, let's just crank it up and see what that sounds like. So if you want to do this like a parallel sort of thing where you're blending this with the original, that might be interesting because the release is never actually letting the drums come back. But if we go to a more sane setting where it's just compressing a little bit, here's what that sounds like. Pretty subtle, just adds a little bit of punch to it, takes those transients and messes with them just a little bit. I don't use this one on drums a whole lot. I think this one can sound really good on bass and vocal sometimes. I don't use this one as much as I thought I would. I love the idea of this 2-knob compressor, but I don't use it a ton compared to the next one we're going to look at, which is the FET compressor. Now, this is a lot like you've seen this before, 1176 style. One thing I didn't realize, if you have an 1176, an actual one, the attack and release knobs just say like 1 through 8 or whatever. 1 through 6, 1 through 7, 1 through 9. I can't remember. But you never know what those actually stand for. So when I use this one, I realize, holy smokes, there is no such thing as a slow attack time on an 1176. Everything is below 1 millisecond. It goes down to 0.02 milliseconds. So super, super fast, up to almost a millisecond. So you're not going to get nice, calm, let lots of the transients through and let it breathe compression. This is going to hit it whenever it crosses the threshold or whenever it starts to compress, it's going to hit it really quickly. Now, the release time can get pretty slow. And the fastest it gets is about 50 milliseconds. So let's just kind of start kind of middle of the road with a 4:1 ratio, and let's see what this can sound like on drums. I really like this on drums and lots of other things, vocals as well. Let's see what kind of sound we can get. Okay, that's a little aggressive. Let's pull it back a little bit. See what we got. Something about it, even like that's not super aggressive compression wise. It's doing something to that sound, right? It's giving it kind of this thickness, this punchiness. It's just doing its thing that you've heard on 1,000 drum records before. It's very, very cool. Let's mess with the attack time a little bit. I didn't hear much with the release time. The attack time, it sounded a little different as we messed around with it. It's kind of interesting. And then here, of course, let's do the all buttons in and just slam this thing. Just see what that sounds like, just because we can. See, even with, I mean, we've slammed everything and it's going nuts. So it's not a great sound, right? But it's still fairly musical. And that's what I found with these. If we were to slam it like that with a standard compressor, let's just do it because we're being ridiculous, with a really fast attack and a pretty quick release, here's what that would sound like. That's not pleasant, right? It's all the bad things about a very just generic compressor. But then you slap on the 1176, you get it just doing crazy things, all buttons in. It's just as much compression as you can kind of get from this device, and yet it still sounds pretty musical. Now, is that the right sound for this particular song? Who knows? Will it be right for every drum sound you ever mix? No, and that's the whole point. Maybe you need a very clean compressor to just lop off the peaks on one mix, but another one you want to really just slam it through an 1176 and just give it something interesting. One thing we don't hear here is how this compression affects things like cymbals. All of that comes into play, and that's all a part of your journey. You got to figure all that stuff out. But these are very different sounding compressors and give you some very different tools in your toolbox for getting different sounds. And they're a lot of fun to play with. So go mess around, find some cool sounds, make some good music.